Election 2013. What does the CSU want? In the interview, CSU leading candidate Gerda Hasselfeldt.
Ms. Hasselfeldt, the CSU, the Christian Social Union, is unique in Germany. It exists only in Bavaria, which it has been governing for more than half a century, and almost always with an absolute majority. Where has the party's success come from?
Ich glaube, ganz wesentlich ist die Identifizierung der CSU mit Bayern.
I think the CSU's identification with Bavaria is absolutely essential. We're running for election in Bavaria only. We represent the special interests of Bavarians not only there, but in Berlin as well. And yet, we never lose sight of the German people as a whole. In Bavaria, though, we have a special situation. Through the diverse landscape, the connection with our rich culture and history, and that all holds the people there together. And I think the CSU embodies this union in a very special way.
But it's still astonishing. All the big parties are eroding, both regionally and at the federal level, while the CSU is probably this country's last real mass membership party.
That's indeed so. I agree that we're really unique as a party. For me personally, that's also the reason I joined the party, because all kinds of professions, all social classes, all age groups are really represented. And we've had to find compromises within the party at times as well. Secondly, it's also the combination of basic values and answers to new challenges, today's challenges. That always poses a big task for a mass membership party. And I think we've accomplished those tasks in the past successfully, over and over.
But that's not all. Although the CSU is actually just a regionally anchored party, it's also had incredible influence, first in Bonn and now in Berlin. It's a big player. That began with party patriarch Franz Josef Strauß, and it remains an important factor through its cooperation with its sister party, the Christian Democratic Union. What does the CSU add to this union?
We're an essential part of the CDU-CSU group in Parliament. Without us, nothing would move forward within the group. During this legislative term, we've also demonstrated that on several issues, such as subsidizing stay-at-home parents. If the CSU hadn't fought for that resolutely, we wouldn't have reached the results we did within the coalition. Another example is heightened infrastructure investment. These are all ideas that originated in Bavaria. They were brought into national politics, and they prevailed there.
If you're a CSU member, you would probably identify yourself as Christian, conservative and socially responsible. Is there anything you would add to that?
That's correct. Christian, socially conscious and conservative. That way we keep things that are worth keeping while also facing up to new challenges, such as childcare. We're observing changing conditions in family policy that require solutions, and we provide them without throwing the status of marriage into question.
You don't bend to the spirit at the moment.
No, but it's always a big challenge to keep your basic values. For example, a high regard for child-rearing and the family, without losing sight of today's necessities. The two have to be reconciled. We see this clearly in family issues. We don't want to make families decisions for them or dictate how they're supposed to live. On the contrary, we want them to decide freely in the knowledge that the state will support them, whatever their decision may be.
But the daughters and granddaughters in the CSU aren't just homemakers anymore. Their grandmothers probably don't live next door either. For that very reason, childcare is likely also a problem for the CSU in rural areas as much as in cities.
That's right. It's not just in cities, as people used to think, but also in the countryside. Well-educated women today want to, or have to, or think they have to, get a job. However they decide, families have become smaller, and therefore childcare has taken on greater importance than was the case earlier. And by the way, that goes not only for children under 3, who are the ones in focus these days, but also for school children. And it's certainly important when the kids hit puberty, when problems often first crop up.
Ms. Hasselfeldt, the CSU has always been a party of domestic security. It proudly points to Bavaria's low crime rate. The German Interior Minister, a CSU man, is in a tough position. US intelligence has been snooping in Germany. People are asking what's more important, security or freedom. What does the CSU say?
These issues really do require assessment. We have to constantly weigh individual liberty against security for citizens. Sensitivity for the protection of personal information is probably more pronounced in Germany than in some other places. That must be respected. And finding a balance between security on the one hand and liberty on the other is the job of the Interior Minister and all policymakers.
Germany was shocked when it became known that the neo-Nazi terrorist group, the NSU, had killed 10 people. Is the far-right threat still that strong? In our fear of Islamic terrorists, have we perhaps taken our eyes off it?
I think we have to take every form of violence and terror and their dangers very seriously, whether from the right or the left, especially when it's based on religion. That's a threat to people's security in Germany, and we have to take it seriously.
Also from the right.
Yes, of course from the right. It should not be underestimated, also because of our history, but not only.
The big campaign issue will probably be the euro crisis after all. Not that others will have much to gain, but your party has always been regarded as somewhat sceptical of Brussels. Do you think that, to save the euro, there was no alternative to the policies that you yourself supported?
It was completely justified to demand that the countries that ran into trouble because of their budgets, the Eurozone's problem countries, do their homework. They were given time through credits and guarantees, but they had to use that time to meet the requirements of the so-called Troika. That meant consolidating their budgets and enacting structural reforms to make their economies more competitive. That was the right path. In my opinion, it was the only way to reach the goal, that each country within the Eurozone must be competitive on its own, so that the Eurozone can be competitive as a unit.
In the euro crisis, we've had heated debates over not only how Europe should reform, but whether more authority should be transferred to Brussels. What does a party sceptical of Brussels think?
In Europe, we certainly have to monitor economic and financial policy better. That's the lesson of our experience in the last few years.
But isn't it also discouraging that the countries simply haven't been sticking to the rules that they signed up to? If they had, we probably wouldn't have had the euro crisis at all.
It was and is indeed discouraging. And it took place because Germany, at the time governed by an SPD Green coalition, Commission, in collaboration with the French government, unilaterally softened the binding criteria that had been negotiated under former Chancellor Helmut Kohl and Theo Weigel at the European level. That was practically an invitation to other countries to follow their example. That can't be allowed to happen again. This doesn't mean transferring all possible authority to Brussels, but we should in this area, in economic and financial policy, and in upholding stability policy. Incidentally, I think it's outstanding that we've hammered out a fiscal pact among the states of Europe. That was a huge achievement. This doesn't mean that all possible authority has to be transferred to Europe, or that European institutions, like the Commission, presume that they can expand their own scope and regulate matters that don't have to be European matters. One example would be drinking water.
The Europe of regions was always a pet project for the CSU. There's also the difficult term subsidiarity, which the CSU has always championed. It's the principle that people should do everything that they are able to do, and Brussels should only be concerned with things that affect everyone. Certainly that's still your demand. Regarding the elections, whenever your party was strong, conservative governments have also been strong. Do you think the results will be good for you?
We're doing everything we can to achieve that. At the moment, we're in a good position. At the events we've been holding, we see how much people agree with us and trust Chancellor Merkel, our regional and party leaders, and the policies of the CDU-CSU. It's very apparent. We're seeing very little desire for change. But we do have to keep working and fighting for every vote until the last day. Increasingly, voters are delaying their decisions until the last minute. And that's why we have to fight to the last minute for every vote.
Ms. Hasselfeldt, thank you.